Good evening. Happy New Year. My name is Kathy McCormick. I'm board president of Perrot Memorial Library in Old Greenwich, Connecticut. Thank you so much for joining us for our first program of 2022 with Dr. Katie Takayasu about her new book, Plants First, a physician's guide to wellness through a plant-forward diet. I want to also thank the members of the Perrot Memorial Library Association, whose generous contributions make programs like these possible. If you're not a member, please consider joining. Details can be found on our website, perrotmemoriallibrary.org. As always, I want to thank Jess Reed from Greenwich Point Marketing, who helps us with all our programs and helps us keep connected to the community. So thank you also to them. Copies of Plants First is available for checkout at perrotmemoriallibrary.org or at Greenwich, Diane's Books in Greenwich, or at our new bookstore in Old Greenwich, Athena Books. And we'll put the links of those in our chat. This program will be recorded and you'll be emailed a link to the recording, and we'll put it up on the Perrot Library YouTube channel when it becomes available. And if you have any questions for Dr. Katie, she'll be happy to answer. You can leave your questions in the chat, and at the end of our discussion, we will be sure to get your questions to her. And now it is my honor to introduce Darien resident and integrative medicine physician, Dr. Katie Takayasu. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Katie. Happy New Year.
Oh, I am so pleased to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I really love the format of Zoom, just so that we can all be together despite all the craziness that's happening outside. So thank you to the Perrot Library for inviting me. Thanks to Kathy for being so amazing this whole entire process. And hello to everybody, especially all those friendly faces. I see you with your cameras on, and the nervous girl from Ohio who still lives inside me. She says hello and thanks you for being here for me. So thank you.
I wish we could meet in person at the library, but unfortunately we can't. But next time we'll be sure that we'll have an in-person meeting with you. So let's get started with some questions. And everyone, don't forget, if you have questions for Dr. Katie, she's be happy to answer them. So first, let's start with what made you want to become a doctor?
You know, I've known that I wanted to be a doctor for a really long time. My dad is a family doctor in Ohio, and I grew up, just to kind of like paint, so like the way that I grew up. I grew up literally within the cornfields in a rural community in Ohio of about 7,000 people. And my dad is one of a couple of town doctors and has a private practice there. And it was really common as a family doctor, you know, kind of out in the middle of nowhere with an ER, at least 30 minutes away, for emergencies to kind of like pop into our driveway literally on a Saturday afternoon. And so by the time I was really little, I remember like people rolling up in pickup trucks and sort of saying like, hey, like this guy needs stitches. And instead of going to the ER, like dad would take him to his office. And when I got to be old enough, he started taking me along, and I would be his, his assistant, and got to see some cool stuff. And I knew that I really wanted to be that person that people turn to and wanted to have in their life a trusted doctor. And I think what, has happened to me over the course of my career is that I've been able to really become the kind of doctor that people want, and that actually brings me a lot of joy, which is like this person who's kind of your friend, who can tell you like it really is, who gives you advice on literally everything from what you're putting on your face to the way that you're feeding your family at dinner time, to like how we're actually managing like the stress of COVID and falling asleep at night. And so I'm kind of all of those things to my patients. And so for those of you who are in the audience and know that, I'm sure you can attest to that feeling. Like I'm the kind of physician who's got your back, because that was the kind of physician model I had, growing up as well. And so becoming a doctor in that way, it sort of just seemed like a natural thing to do.
Great. And so since your book is called Plants First, can you tell us exactly a little bit more about what is a plant-forward diet?
I started writing Plants First because I actually got into like living a plant-forward diet very authentically. I went to this very cool conference with a colleague of mine a couple of years ago. It's probably now like close to 5 or 6 years ago. And for 3 days, we went to this conference and we had to eat a raw vegan diet. Now, just imagine what would be on the menu with a raw vegan diet. My friends, it's a lot of salad. And so after eating lots of salad and raw vegetables and all sorts of things for like a day or two, first of all, like I skipped a meal because I was like, and I think I've had enough. And the second thing that I noticed was all the things that had sort of been going on, even though I lived a very healthy lifestyle, all the things that had kind of been going on in my life seemed to be a little bit better. All at once, my digestion seemed to be a little bit better. I wasn't as tired in the afternoon. I noticed, that I was sleeping really well during this conference. And some of that, of course, is conference living, which is a little bit, akin to vacation. But I noticed that those kinds of things continued when I got home. And so then I said to my family, I was like, hey guys, I really think we need to start eating more plants. And like I said, we never had a bad diet to begin with. We actually had a pretty good diet. It's just that we sort of dialed down some of the animal stuff and dialed up on the plants. And we all noticed that we started to feel better. So in my mind, a plant-forward diet is not a plant-only diet. It's not a plant-based diet. It's not a vegan diet. It's a diet that prioritizes plants. And if you read through plants first, you'll see that like I really do try to hold this 80-20 rule, that it matters what you do 80% of the time. And the other 20% you don't have to worry quite as much about. And so, in that 20% might be animal products. It might be your favorite cheese. It might be, it might be other inflammatory foods that happen to be plant-based, like processed foods or wine or things of that nature, things that we know that aren't like so great for us, but we can tolerate in small amounts. And that the anti-inflammatory diet that I go into in the book is really my answer to finding this right balance. And I recognize that like not everybody feels great eating a ton of plants. And so it becomes this idea that we need to balance fiber, fat, and protein. But everybody sort of mix into fiber, fat, protein is a little bit different. So you might have someone who needs a little bit more protein, and actually getting it from an animal source is a pretty efficient way for them. You might find someone that's a little bit more fat sensitive, and they notice that if they just eat the right amount of fat at their meals and snacks, they feel so satiated and they're not hungering and pandering for more. And then we have patients, whose digestive systems just work really well when they're super, super, super diligent about the amount of fiber that they get in every day. And so kind of like figuring where that is for yourself is all something that I talk about in the book. And I call that your wellness intuition. It's like what feels good to you. But it really does start for most people with trying to prioritize more plants.
So for someone who has not been eating the most healthy or plant-forward diet, is this something that would be easy for a beginner? Someone you can gently.
Yeah, a gentle like sort of entrance into the plant-based or the plant-forward sort of arena. Honestly, you can start tomorrow morning. You can start at your very next meal. I think we kind of all get into this sort of like mindset of like, oh God, I've been doing like the worst job ever. And it's kind of like, well, whatever, like I'm just going to keep eating, bad food or do whatever doesn't feel great to us because of the things that we've done in the past. But literally food is information, and you can start with your next meal or snack giving your body better information, because it is in the end all about inputs and outputs. But I would say if you're someone who's a little shy about the number of plants that you're eating, then to start with just this very simple idea. Make a circle. Imagine that's your plate. Divide it into half. Half of that circle should be green vegetables, like all the really, really good ones, all the some of the carrots, the celery, green beans, all your bitter greens, like your Swiss chard, your kale, like broccoli, all the cruciferous vegetables, like all that stuff fits into that half. And that's kind of what you want to aim for at most meals. And then you take the other half and you can divide it into thirds. And a third should be dedicated to protein, either from a plant or an animal. A third should be dedicated to fat. And then a third should be dedicated to either starchy vegetables, which would be like your very sweet vegetables like squashes and sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, or even whole grains. And then you can start to see, like, if you get that balance on your plate, you can start to feel a little bit better and know that you're making good choices for yourself. And it's kind of hard sometimes, I think, to think about, like, well, what are the plant-based or plant sources of protein? And one of the cool things about plants, which is different than like animal protein, which is like, you eat chicken, like it is all protein, like that's the only macronutrient there. If you eat plant proteins, you tend to sort of get in the mix a little fiber, a little fat, a little protein. So something like, say, almonds could be a protein for you, but it also packs fiber, it also packs fat. So as a snack choice, like that actually satisfies all of the things in your macronutrient department and will keep you really satiated. So I would start there. So like, if Kathy, if you just like tomorrow, like I'll give you a pass at breakfast. You don't have to have vegetables at breakfast if you don't want to, but for sure by lunchtime you should. Try to make half your plate vegetables. And if you just do that, I promise that you'll be moving in the right direction.
Great. So in your book, and it is the start of a new year. So in your book, you talk about a detox program. Can you tell me a little bit, or tell everyone a little bit about what is a detox? What is your idea of a detox and why a detox is important?
Yeah, I think this is a huge topic in January because everybody's sort of thinking about dry January. People are thinking about all the sort of sins that they might have from the holidays and just wanting to kind of get back on track. And so lots of people like to do resets in January. And a lot of people do the Whole30. They'll get back on the Weight Watchers bandwagon. They'll do, the Detox through Gwyneth Paltrow, like lots of different things. But I have my own version of detoxing, which I call Dr. Katie Detox. But the real hallmark of it is giving your body a space for a break. It's a dedicated time that you give yourself. It's 5 days, it's 10 days, it's 30 days, if it's 6 months, whatever you decide, where you're going to be really mindful about your choices. And I think it's important to be mindful about what we're feeding ourselves, but actually also how we live the rest of our lives. How are we sleeping? Are we moving our physical body every day? Are we paying attention to our spiritual selves? Or are we just sort of anxious messes all of the time? Because all of that impacts the way that we feel. But when you give your body the right circumstances, you give it, if you will, like hypoallergenic food, meaning food that's better, easier to digest. The body doesn't have to work so hard to like sort of take out like the extra like toxins that exist like in a processed food. Then the body doesn't have to work so hard and it's got extra energy to actually do the good work of detoxification that it naturally can do. That's why we have livers. That's why we have kidneys. That's why we have skin, for that matter. Our sweat, our urine, our poop, even though it's totally not cute to talk about, is the way that our body naturally detoxifies. So if you notice, like after you drink a lot of coffee, that your pee smells kind of funny, it's your body saying like, hey, that might be too much for me. Or if you notice after eating a really heavy meal, one night, the next day your digestion's really sluggish, or it gives you really loose stools, it's your body saying like, hey, like this is too much toxin for me to sort of hold on to at one time. That's another reason like why, we don't feel so good when we drink too much alcohol too, right? It's just too much stuff for our liver. But if you give yourself like 5 or 10 days where you're just eating very, very simply good, nutritious, meals and being very mindful about your lifestyle choices, generally, your body can do that detoxification work and you feel better. And so in the book, I actually go through like what it would take to do a 5-day detox at home. But if you're interested in doing one with me, I do them every January. And one of my patients today was like, Dr. Katie, she's like, I didn't realize you were a mere mortal. After reading your book, I realized you struggle with a lot of things too. She's like, so do you do the detox too? And I'm like, absolutely. I reset myself every January too, because we all need that space to just allow the body to come back to zero.
So when is your detox starting? Has it started yet?
The big one that I'm doing, my 10-day is January 23rd, so it's not too late. I think it's going to be huge. I think everybody is just ready for the thing that's just going to like help them move through this COVID stagnation, all the sort of disappointments of the holidays, all the poor choices that many of us made, but also get 2022 off to a good start. Because I don't know about you guys, but it kind of feels a little bit like deja vu to me. I kind of thought 2022 was going to be this brand new year with new energy. And so far, it's kind of feeling like a little bit of a repeat of 2021. And I personally want to break that feeling in my life. And this is one way to do it. It's one way to shake up the energy. So you could join me January 23rd.
And details can be found at drkatie.com, right?
Yeah, you can find details there, and feel free anytime to reach out to me. I'm hello@drkatie.com too, if anybody has, questions even after the talk.
So I know, Dr. Katie, you're an acupuncturist as well, right?
I am,
When,
absolutely.
can you tell me a little bit? So when did you choose to get your certification in acupuncture?
I got really into integrative medicine when I was in residency. So just to kind of paint the picture, this was, like back in 2011 or so. I was a second year resident and sort of feeling pretty all shades of awful. I was working, 80 or 90 hours a week. I wasn't sleeping very much. I definitely was not moving my body enough. I was eating way too much hospital food, and just kind of feeling like a big shell of myself. And I actually really wanted to be pregnant. And when I went to see my primary doctor because of my irregular periods, he said to me, you know what you should do? You should go see my wife's acupuncturist. And I was like, really? I'd really never thought about it before. And when I went there, I was lying on the acupuncture table and I was like, oh my God, if I could just in my career help people feel this amazing, like, wouldn't that be such a gift? And then I discovered acupuncture was also a part of integrative medicine training. So that's when I decided to do some post residency fellowship work and did a 2-year program with the University of Arizona, which is Andrew Weil's program, and then in conjunction with Stanford Hospital's fellowship program. And that's kind of how I ended up in Stamford, Connecticut. But I find acupuncture to be a really helpful resource for patients, from everything from managing perimenopausal symptoms to helping with sleep issues to digestive things, managing pain of all kinds, back pain, neck pain, headaches. Kind of if you have an ailment, there's a pretty good chance that acupuncture can help you feel better. And one of the cool things that we're able to do as physicians, in addition to regular Chinese type acupuncture, is we can do what's called a trigger point injection. So if you guys ever have like those like just muscle aches and you're just like, I just need like the big massage, like not just like a Swedish massage, but you need like the big deep tissue, like ×4, then a trigger point injection could be really helpful for you too, because it releases myofascial tension. And so I love using acupuncture, but it's not the only thing. It's a part of many things that we do to try to help the body to feel better. Just like eating plants is not the only thing that helps someone feel better. It's a piece in the many different things that we do that can help us, on the road to wellness. And I find like literally it's like I said, nothing is the silver bullet, but it's these tiny little choices that we make. It's a little bit of acupuncture. It's the right supplements. It's the best nutrition that you can manage in your life. It's a little bit of physical movement every day. It's putting, your phone down at 8 p.m. and putting it on do not disturb, and not picking it back up until the morning and getting your rest. It's making sure that you do something every day that soothes your spiritual self. All these tiny little choices are what actually helps the body to feel as well as it can. And then that's when you can pepper in, medications and like other things that we do. But you kind of have those bases, first.
Okay. And then what made you decide to write this book? There are so many books right now about wellness. It seems that it's a hot topic. There are so many cookbooks. Yeah. There's so much information. What made you decide to jump into an already very populated market?
Oh, I know there's so much noise in this market. And I think that's what I really wanted this book to be, was sort of like the answer to all the noise. It's like patients come in all the time and they're like, well, I thought I should be doing a paleo diet, but then I read this and I thought autoimmune protocol. And then I read this and I'm like, maybe I need a low FODMAP diet. And it's just like, everybody's got their thing. This is meant to be a resource for the common person generally, who wants to move their health in the right direction. And it's obviously, I wrote it, all of it. I didn't have any co-authors or anybody helping me behind the scenes, at least with the writing part. I had many people help me with the photography. Actually, all the recipes were created by people in the Darien community and photographed in my kitchen once they dropped them off to my house, which was a really lovely event. But all of the book information is meant to be like my distillation of everything that I know and hold to be true, the biggest medical research that's out there, and trying to distill it down to a place where, it's applicable to the common person, of course, with the idiosyncrasies of like what feels good in your body. And so that's kind of like where the book started. But when I, was talking to the publishers and they, had really wanted it a very nutrition friendly, forward book, which is what it is. But it seems I couldn't write about those things if I didn't also write about the importance of lifestyle and like how the body actually detoxifies and feels better. And so all of that is kind of wrapped up into the book. And it's actually, it's quite sizable. For those of you who don't have it, everybody's always really shocked about like how thick it actually is. Like people are like, it's kind of like a Bible. It kind of is. And it's a really beautiful one, actually. I think all the pictures are really beautiful. And I'm really proud of it. I think we've got people in the audience. It's like I planted them there. Just like, really a resource for people that they can refer back to over and over again, as well as cook from. I hope this book gets dirty in your kitchen as you're trying out new recipes. Because I wanted it to be kind of everything that, that I am, which is, a resource to people. That's where I derive my joy from.
So, since there are so many recipes in the book, do you have some personal favorites?
Oh, I have so many.
Those of us who
I have
the
so
book?
many. But I have to say, I'm inclined to tell you about one particular dinner recipe that I have made probably at least 15 times. Every recipe in here I trialed probably at least between 3 to 5 times on my family. So much so that by the time we got to last winter, they were like, Katie, can we please stop eating like the same food over and over? And I'm like, I just want to make sure it's perfect. But this recipe, the Thai coconut curry noodle soup, is to die for. I've made this for everybody from men who've never eaten a plant-based meal, let alone tofu before. I've made it for my kids. I made it for them actually on New Year's Day. I've made it for like all sorts of people, and people love it. And one of the reasons is it's got great flavor, but it's also got noodles in it. But the noodles in this particular recipe are from soba, which is a Japanese noodle that is typically eaten like on the New Year, because it has it's a very long, skinny noodle, and it's got the significance of like bringing you a long life. So it's kind of a neat sort of cultural thing in my family because my husband is Japanese. But I think the other piece of it is that everybody loves like that mouthful of noodles. But unlike ramen or spaghetti or other pastas, soba is made with buckwheat. And buckwheat's actually pretty good for you, and it happens to be gluten-free. And so it's a really nice way if you're trying to cut some of the wheat and the gluten out of your life, to have a nice sort of carbolicious meal, if you will, that's chock full of vegetables, but that also has the alternative protein source of tofu. And the way that it's prepared in this particular dish, I actually like pan fry it before putting it in the soup, so it gets a little bit crispy on the outside, which I also find to be a really good trick when doing tofu, because otherwise tofu can sometimes taste a little bland. And that's what you don't want. You don't want to introduce your family or yourself for that matter to like a new food and then have it taste really bland or, just really boring. And so I would definitely call out this recipe. The other thing I'm currently obsessed with is avocado mousse, avocado chocolate mousse. I don't know what it is. I think it must be like the fat and the sweet, especially coming off the holiday. I really still want something sweet occasionally, but I don't want like all the sugar of the things that we were eating, during the holidays. And so having avocado mousse seems to be like a really good fix for me recently as well. So those are two I would shout out. But if you talk to me next week, I'd probably have 2 different ones.
I have a question. In the Thai coconut curry noodle soup,
Yeah.
you use a recipe, use 1 tablespoon of coconut aminos.
Yes.
Can you tell everyone Some people might not be familiar with that. Can you tell them about that and why that's an ingredient?
Oh, 100%. So I'll say too that if there's any unfamiliar ingredients to you in the book, I actually have like what I call Dr. Katie's Life Kitchen. And that's actually the name of my emails that I send out to people who want, interesting tidbits. It's called Dr. Katie's Life Kitchen, and you can join that for free. If you head to drkatie.com/social, there's a link where you can sign yourself up for it. And I give you like little tidbits. But in Dr. Katie's Life Kitchen in the book, I actually go through all of like the different sort of remarkable ingredients, and one of them is coconut aminos. So many people are familiar with like amino acids, like if that kind of tastes a little bit of salt, like salty. Coconut aminos are actually sort of like a mixture between a soy sauce combined with maple syrup. It's got this really beautiful, sweet, savory, umami, salty sort of flavor to it. And it comes just from coconut nectar, and then it's put into a bottle. It kind of looks like a soy sauce, and because of that sweet flavor and the saltiness of it too. It's kind of like the thing you can add to anything where you're like, this just needs something, and you can just sprinkle a little bit of that in it, and I promise it will taste better. And it's actually not the worst thing for you. It still has sugar in it. It still has salt in it. So you do have to be careful about how much you use, and you don't want to go overboard. But it can be a really nice like helper in the flavor department. So thanks for asking that. But there's a lot of other things in here that might be new to you that I go through in the cookbook to kind of help you figure out like what's the best brand to buy, like where do I get this stuff, how do I use it, and what's its flavor profile, and like what does it satisfy, in the sort of complexity of like the rainbow of things that we eat.
And we're lucky to live in a place where most of these ingredients people will not have a hard time finding them.
Oh, absolutely. Between Whole Foods and like any of the grocery delivery services like Fresh Direct, even Trader Joe's has some stuff. Though I have to say, I do love me some Trader Joe's, but you have to be really careful about what you buy there, because a lot of it can be sort of like you can get a lot of stuff that's been flavored with other things, and not all of that is really helpful for us. So be careful when you're shopping at Trader Joe's to really read the labels. But if you're going to Whole Foods and those kinds of places, you can find all the stuff. You can Stop and Shop, like it's everywhere, because people want to eat healthy and they want to do it deliciously. And especially now we want to be cooking and connecting to the kitchen.
So you mentioned your husband is from Japan. Did he bring any recipes to the book?
Oh, you're so wonderful. So my husband was born here, but my in-laws are from Japan. And one of the things that I noticed when I went to my mother-in-law's for the very first time, back when we were just dating like 20 plus years ago, was that she gave me vegetables for breakfast. And I remember sitting down that first morning and being like, oh wow, like there's broccoli on my plate and it's like 7 a.m. And thinking that was so strange. And now if you came to my house and my kids didn't have vegetables on their plates at breakfast, they would be high-fiving around the corner in the kitchen because I had forgotten to put them on. Like it's just a normal sort of part of the way that we like live our life now. But one of the things that Keiko really taught me in the cooking department was really the importance of like how you flavor vegetables, because vegetables don't inherently have like a ton of flavor. Like meat, when you eat like pork or you eat beef, like it's got an inherent flavor to it. But vegetables, celery doesn't really taste like much, but it does take on the flavor of other things that it sits with very well. And so she taught me really how to flavor vegetables. She also taught me about these things called sea vegetables, SEA, sea vegetables, which would be things like kombu and dulse, wakame flakes, those kinds of things. These are the iodine-rich vegetables that are grown in the sea that we can harvest and actually use in our food. So like kombu is a beautiful thing that she's been using for 30 years more. And I have just recently found in the last like 5 to 10 that actually eases the digestion of like beans. So if I make a soup and it's got beans in it, I will put a little bit of kombu. And so the flavor profiles that she's taught me, but also like these just little digestive helps, I think are really amazing. And it's wonderful actually to be in a household where my husband, I'll make something for him and I'll be like, oh, this sort of tastes like something my mom used to make when I was a kid. In fact, there's a recipe in here for a furikake crusted halibut with roasted vegetables and coconut lime cream. And this one, I sort of make my own furikake using almonds and sea vegetables. And when I made this for him the very first time as a trial, he's like, oh my God, this tastes like this thing my mom used to make. And so these flavors have existed for years. It's just that many of us, especially those of us who may have grown up in the Midwest amongst meat and potatoes, like just don't really know how to work with. So I hopefully will give people some ideas in the cookbook.
I've noticed more restaurants are incorporating sea vegetables. Have you heard of the Oyster Club in Mystic?
No, but do I need to go there?
Yeah, well, they're an example because they're close to, I think there's the Thimble Islands, there's a seaweed farmer, and other than kombu, I noticed in another book you had you sprinkle seaweed on other things. Do you have any other tips for how we can incorporate more sea vegetables?
Oh, for sure. For sure. So like you can buy dulse like in a shaker, like the size of like a salt shaker. You can also buy little kelp flakes. You can buy all sorts of stuff like in shaker form. I just keep that next to the salt and pepper shaker on my counter so that when I'm making anything, literally, if I'm putting salt and pepper in it, which is everything, I'm just sprinkling that on as well. And that ensures that we get iodine, which is one of our like sort of crucial nutrients. We used to back in the day all have iodized salt. But now we're all eating fancy sea salts and kosher salts and all these different kinds of salts. I love me some flaky like Malden sea salt for sure. Like there's somewhat actually on a cookie recipe in the cookbook. And I just find like that kind of thing so satisfying, but that doesn't have any iodine added to it. And so what we found as, more people have developed thyroid problems over the course of time is that people weren't getting enough iodine. And it's not that you need to go out there and supplement necessarily. It's just that you need to be mindful of like getting all of these sort of things in your diet. And sea vegetables are a really great way to do that. And recently my girlfriend got me back onto wakame flakes. And so I've been putting wakame flakes like on my salad at lunch. And I just, a little sprinkle of them. They're kind of salty, kind of have a sea flavor to them, but they're also crunchy. And sometimes having like that little bit of crunch also like feels really good. So that's some way that I do the sea vegetables in my life.
Great. So, okay, so let's talk about, it's a very stressful time right now that we're living through. And you talked a little bit about mindfulness, meditation, yoga, acupuncture. Do you have any other tips on how we can stay healthy during physically and mentally during this difficult time?
Yeah, I always come back to like the four things. And I ask myself this question all the time whenever I start to feel a little unbalanced or a little unearthed, or I start to feel kind of like mopey and like just kind of sad or blue. I sort of ask myself, like, well, how am I doing with my four big buckets? How's my nutrition? How's my sleep? How's my movement? And how's my attention to my spiritual self? You just hit on the spiritual self in the form of meditation and yoga and mindfulness, maybe a little Tai Chi. There's lots of different ways to tap into that spiritual self. If you're a church-going person or you attend a synagogue, whatever floats your boat, as long as it gets you into figuring out like a connection to the real you. And the real you is the one that you share with just your closest family and friends. It's the one that you identify with, that it's not like your external sort of like who you are to the community, but it's like the real you. And there are so many ways to sort of put deposits into the bank of the real you. And it's not hosting big parties. Well, no one's hosting big parties these days, but it's not hosting big parties and doing fancy things. It's a bath at the end of the day with Epsom salts. It's turning off your phone and actually talking to your spouse. It's tucking your kids in instead of like letting them, lull themselves to sleep with the iPads. it's reading your favorite book because it just feels good to read something that like takes your mind off everything. All of these things are like little deposits in your bank. And the idea would be with, with your spiritual self to put more deposits in than withdrawals. And as far as like other things that feel really good, yoga can be a really beautiful way to tap into the spiritual self. I love yoga. I didn't understand at all what yoga was when I was in residency. I would get to the end and I'd be lying in Shavasana, where you like sort of lie, they call it corpse pose, where you like lie on your mat and be still. And I would literally just make my to-do list for the rest of the day. And now I realize that when I get into that position, like that's my reward for the last 45 minutes of effort that I've put in, just sort of mindfully moving, like letting go of all the busyness of our thoughts and just literally thinking like all I've got to do is just do this warrior two pose. And I connect with a yoga teacher that I love a couple of times a week on Zoom in a group class. But if you do it safely, you can do it at a mask, with a mask on at a gym, or you can do it, for free with YouTube, from home. If meditation speaks to you, spending even just 5 minutes a day doing something that kind of calms the mind can be really helpful. Some people love Tai Chi because they like to work on balance and they like the energetics of working with Qigong or Tai Chi. There's just so many different ways to tap into that spiritual self. But I feel like anytime that you feel like your body just feels unbalanced, you just don't quite feel right, ask yourself those 4 questions. What am I doing with my food? What am I doing with my movement? What am I doing with my sleep? And how am I doing with my spiritual self? And that will at least get you started moving in the right direction of like filling those buckets, because it's only in filling those buckets that you're able to do sort of anything else. Like that's the ground that needs to be really, needs to be fertilized, if you will.
And I noticed before we started that you had a cup of tea
I do.
with you. So do you have any for relaxing, calming? Do you have any favorites that you recommend?
Oh, you know what? This is traditional medicinals, and I really love them. You can find them at Whole Foods. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it all over the place. I love traditional medicinals, one, because they have like these beautiful little quotes on the back. This one says, "Beauty is not caused, it is." And that's from Emily Dickinson. I mean, that's like a nice little nugget at the end of the day, isn't it? This happens to be lavender chamomile tea. I like blends of different things, but I only like it when I understand what the blend is. So something like lavender chamomile, it sounds very good to me. I love anything with ginger in it. They make a very nice turmeric tea as well. They have some really beautiful green tea blends. And so if you're not really a green tea drinker, you can find like green tea lemongrass or green tea ginger. And sometimes that can help kind of, get you into drinking green tea, which is probably honestly the single most healthy thing on the face of the planet would be green tea. But I'll tell you why I like traditional medicinals is because their teas are really like pharmaceutical grade. And so I like with lavender chamomile, like I've let this tea bag in here now for the duration of our talk. And once you put like chamomile tea in a cup and let it steep for like 20 minutes, especially if you do like 2 bags of it, you start to get like pharmaceutical grade, like amounts of these herbs. What you want to stay away from in the tea department are like the additives. You got to be a real sleuth when you read the ingredient labels. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. I realized earlier I kind of threw Trader Joe's under the bus. But another brand that can sometimes be problematic in the tea department is Yogi tea. Like you'll read the ingredient label and you'll be like, wait, why does this have stevia in it? So be a real sleuth when you read the ingredients. And if it says literally like turmeric and ginger, you're in business. And it starts to say things like natural flavors or natural spices or things like that. It should cause you pause. If something is so natural, why can't you just tell me what it is? So when you see that kind of stuff on labels, even tea labels, you have to be a little bit suspect. But generally, I have found traditional medicinals to be great. Another tea brand I really love is Numi, Numi. And then the brand of green tea that my husband and I drink generally is called Ito-en, and that's a Japanese brand, Ito. Next word is En. And those are all some really nice brands, but there's many others out there as well.
And is Ito N available at all the regular stores?
We buy that one online. In fact, that was my mother-in-law's gift to me last Christmas. She literally sent me a case of tea. And I opened it up and I was like, I felt like I'd won the lottery to get this big, like sort of, it was probably like 8 boxes of tea. And if, of course we drank it all, but you can find that one online. And you can sometimes find that at like the Japanese grocery store that's in your community.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the time where we should start thinking about questions for you. But to wrap up, what about you? Do you have any role models that you look to for recipes, advice, inspiration?
Oh, that's so nice. As far as people that I look to for advice, it's the people that it's my own healthcare team that I cherish so much. It's the people I've formed relationships with over the course of time. Some of my favorite people actually are in the Greenwich community. I love Courtney Evans of Well Refined. I think she is a beautiful health coach who knows a lot, and I cherish her opinions. She and I partnered together for the Dr. Katie Detox. As far as other like role models, I get my information from all sorts of different places. So it kind of depends on what the kind of information I'm looking for. But I have spiritual guides, people that I turn to for like my yoga practice, people I go to for my movement practices, like my like different Zoom classes that I do for exercise, all those things. But ultimately, in the end, I come back to my mom and my grandma, and I'm like, what would Grandma Margie do? How would Grandma Margie make this recipe? And she's literally just turned 92, and she's just so spry. And I think in the end, what keeps people alive and keeps all of us, content with the life that we have is social connection. So above all, like the thing that I cherish above anything, above any kind of information, is the connection that I have to the information. And it's the yoga teacher who gives me that direction to do a warrior two. It's my grandmother who tells me that she eats a couple of prunes every day because it keeps her regular. It's the connection to to that information that matters. And honestly, I know all of you don't know me, but I hope that you read this book and that you can feel the intent and the connection that I wanted to give to you, because like I wanted to sort of share something, so, powerful and pure from my own life. So yeah, that's a long-winded answer to your very beautiful question.
That's great. I think it's getting to be times that we should start opening the conversation up to questions for you.
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, first, Lisa Levy, who I know is a friend of yours, she says you can buy Ito N at Fuji Mart in Stanford. So anyone who wants to buy Dr. Katie's tea pick, they can find it. Angela wants to know, do you feel that organic tea is preferred to avoid pesticides?
It's such a tricky thing with the organic tea. Yes, it probably is better to buy organic tea. That said, many of the small tea farmers can't afford to get the organic seal of approval. And so we would be missing out on many different varieties of tea that might actually be really, really powerful and beautiful for us because of the small farms. So I think you kind of have to weigh the good with the bad there and probably do your research and find out. But I know a lot of the smaller tea farms just can't really afford to have that certification. And organic is a funny thing. I talk about, whether to buy organic things in the book or not. And, my sort of my fast and dirty rule on organic is that if you eat the peel of something, then it probably should be organic. And if you end up peeling out the outside of it, then it probably doesn't need to be organic. And if you want more information on organic too, the Environmental Working Group has, their list of the Queen 15 or the Dirty Dozen every year. But that's kind of my quick and dirty rule to organic. I'm not quite as picky about organic tea per se because of like that small farm and wanting to, try lots of different, ethnic and, interesting teas.
Um, another another viewer said that that tea, HON, is also available at Costco.
Costco. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Didn't say which Costco, but Costco. Kirsten wants to know your thoughts about collagen, vitamins, and calcium from almond milk. Or she wants to hear your thoughts about collagen and vitamins and calcium from almond milk.
You got it. The jury was out for me on collagen until a couple of years ago. And now I think the research is really starting to back up the fact that collagen is probably a really good thing for all of us. Now that I'm north of 40, I think so much about my skin. And we know that there's loss of collagen, not only in our skin, but also in other parts of our body. And, that's ultimately something that we kind of want to preserve. We also know that collagen is really supportive to the gut. And so if you're someone who has irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, or you just struggle with kind of like indigestion from time to time and want to strengthen your resilience, and also recognize that our food tube is connected to the outside world, right? It's like this is our connection to the outside world from all the way down, to the rectum. And so we want to protect that barrier from the outside world into like what's coming into our body. And collagen is actually a really nice way to strengthen the tight junctions that exist like in our digestive tract. So I'm a big fan of collagen. You can find marine collagen, you can get beef collagen, you can get chicken collagen. You can also get collagen in the form of bone broth. And so like when I'm making whole grains or a soup, I'm not cooking really generally anymore with even vegetable or chicken stock. I'm cooking with bone broth. And the reason for that is it's packed full of protein. It's got a ton of collagen. It's got all these big, beautiful nutrients. Plus, cooking like your quinoa and bone broth with a little salt just like tastes really good. And it's got some nutrition to it too. You can also take collagen supplements. You can also find it in powdered form. You can find collagen mixed with matcha, green tea, and you can make yourself a matcha latte in the morning. There's lots of different ways to get it in, but I'm a big fan of collagen and a little bit every day. The second question was about vitamin D. Almost hands down, universally, 99% of us need vitamin D. And that's because most of us just don't get enough in our diet because it's not really available in very many foods. And also because we live in Connecticut and it's like sunny like 4 hours of the day, maybe. And none of us are outside, getting enough of sunlight. And sunlight's how we naturally convert vitamin D in our bodies. And so taking a vitamin D supplement is really meaningful. I'd say most people can very easily take like 1,000 to 2,000 international units a day. Some people need more, like up to 5 or 10,000. You do get a little bit more bioavailability with D3, which is actually the over-the-counter vitamin D. So you can generally just, buy a vitamin D3 supplement and get what you need there. The other thing about calcium, vitamin D, is that in order to get calcium into your bone matrix, you've got to get it from your digestive tract into the system, and then you got to get it incorporated into the bone matrix. And to do that, you need vitamin K. And so vitamin K is especially K2 is really important. So you'll find a lot of supplements now or multivitamins that have D3 and K2, and that helps get the calcium into the bone matrix. I don't recommend supplementing with calcium like universally. And the reason is because calcium can end up getting deposited in some of the vasculature, especially in the heart. And what we're finding these days is that people who over supplement with calcium actually are getting, calcium and hardening of plaques in the vessels of their heart, which puts them at risk for cardiovascular disease. And so we don't really want that to happen. Most people need somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day. A little bit more if you are a young woman or a teenage girl. Not that much more, and a little bit more if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. But generally, most of us need like say 1,000 to 1,200. If you're getting a really, really good plant basis in your diet, you can probably bank on getting like 300 to 500 milligrams a day in calcium. And then every source of dairy that you have on top of that is about 300 to 500 milligrams, depending on like what the source is. So if you have a really good diet, you're eating lots of plants, you got probably close to a third to a half of your daily calcium. And then if you're getting like, some almond milk in your coffee and you have a little bit of, yogurt, or you have other things in your diet that are supplemented with calcium, then you're probably getting most of what you need. And maybe you only need to take a small amount in supplement form, but you kind of have to do some math so that you're not getting too much, because each calcium pill, those big honkers, tend to be like 500 milligrams, and you just can't really absorb more than that at one time anyway. I kind of go back to if I'm going to take a calcium supplement, I take one little calcium pill every day. And it's got maybe 100 or 200 milligrams in it. It's a real tiny little guy, and it's made by New Chapter. It's called Bone Strength Take Care. I like it because it's really tiny, and I can sort of figure out how much I need to take on a daily basis. Because some days I eat ice cream and I don't need to take calcium, and others days, I realize I haven't had any other, big sources of calcium outside of my green vegetables. I haven't been as good about my almonds, or I haven't been as good about tofu or other things that are rich in calcium. Then I take a few more. So I kind of do a little calculation for myself every day. And that's kind of the way that I approach collagen, vitamin D, and calcium.
Do you have a vitamin D that you recommend?
I do. I like pure encapsulations. In fact, on that webpage I gave you earlier, which is drkatie.com/social, there's also a link there for my favorite supplements, and I give you all the brands. I give you all the brands that I like. And so Pure Encapsulations is a great herb and supplement company. Other good brands are Gaia, Gaia. I use a lot of integrative therapeutics products personally. There's a lot of really nice brands out there. But for vitamins, I kind of come back to Pure Encapsulations.
Wasn't there a lot of research about vitamin D helping with COVID? People that
Absolutely.
had low vitamin
Absolutely.
D did not have good COVID outcomes.
Right.
So
it's such an interesting thing, right? Such an interesting thing. But you bring up a great point, which is like, you should know your level of vitamin D. And if it's not, not in the 40 to 60 or higher range, then you need to be supplementing.
Especially at this time. How do you feel about smoothies or liquid diets to kick off a detox?
I'm not such a big fan of smoothies, mostly because I personally don't really like to drink my calories. I find it a little more satiating to actually choose something. That said, I have found smoothies to be satiating when, again, they have that magical mix of fiber, fat, and protein. So when you make a smoothie, start with like a 2-to-1 ratio of vegetables to fruit. So if you use a half cup of blueberries and you got to put a full cup of cucumbers or a full cup of spinach or whatever your green is, make sure that you've got some kind of fat and some kind of protein. You could do hemp seeds or chia seeds or flax seeds. That would be, sort of both buckets, both fiber and a little bit of protein. You could add in the cookbook, I have a smoothie recipe that I co-wrote actually with my sleep therapist called the recovery smoothie. And we put silken tofu in that particular smoothie as a protein source, which actually works so great. And my kids actually really liked it too. And then you have to add some kind of fat if you're doing something like that for protein. Like you could add some nut butter, you could add coconut, coconut milk, whatever you want. But start with that ratio of 2-to-1 of vegetables to fruit. If you taste a smoothie and you're like, oh my God, this is delicious, and it kind of tastes like your own version of a milkshake, then it's probably not so good for you. If it's just kind of sweet enough that you can tolerate it, then you're probably moving in the right direction. You don't want your smoothies to be big sugar bombs, and they can be if you don't have the right mix of macronutrients, from the start. In general, though, I would say really pay attention to what the signals your body gives you. If you stay full after eating something for 3 to 4 hours, you nailed it in the nutrition department. If you're hungry an hour later, you know that you didn't do a very good job. And if you're not hungry for 6 hours later, that you way overdid it. So really pay attention to the signals that your body gave you. And if you have a smoothie and you feel amazing, like your energy is really great and you're satisfied until lunchtime, then you probably did a really good job, mixing your macronutrients.
And I know you're a fan of Chinese medicine and even Ayurveda. Cold beverages aren't a smoothie, I would say, would be a cold beverage. They generally steer away from things, drinking or eating things that are too cold.
That's right. So being mindful, like being mindful of like what's happening in your external environment makes a lot of sense, right? So like this time of year, like having a, ice cold smoothie is probably not the best choice for anybody's constitution because it's 20 degrees outside. But on a 90-degree day, it could be a really great choice. That's kind of why we just naturally lean into like more soups and stews and like warming foods. But you're totally right. Like all that sort of ancient wisdom that we've gotten from our grandmothers like actually makes sense. And I'm pretty sure your grandma would also be like rolling in her grave if she knew you were eating a salad like on a 50-degree day.
Back to tea for 1 second. Do you have an opinion about Tulsi tea? Is that holy basil?
Tulsi tea is very good. Yes. Holy basil is a beautiful adaptogen. It's an herb that helps us adapt to stress. It's very, very soothing. Everybody's body is a little bit different, reacting to different adaptogens. My body loves holy basil. Some people love lemon balm. Some other people love passion flower. But try a lot of those different adaptogens and see just how your body reacts, and trust your body. Like if you feel really good after taking something and it sort of calms the nervousness you had, or it, helps your mood a little bit, then you're probably making a pretty good decision for your body.
Okay, two questions about one question is about saying that dairy is not a good source of calcium, and the other question is about what about soy for breast cancer survivors or breast cancer. So
yeah, I would agree. I don't tend to have I should have qualified this a little bit better when we were talking about calcium before. When I said dairy, I kind of meant like also dairy alternatives. I agree that animal dairy is not the best source of calcium. There are many foods, and I talk about them in the book, that give us, plant-based sources of calcium without all the sort of negative effects of animal dairy. When I said I was blanketing dairy together, I also meant plant-based alternatives to dairy, because those are supplemented with calcium. So yeah, when you're thinking about foods that are rich in calcium, come back to some of your leafy greens, to broccoli, to tofu, to almonds, and a lot of other beautiful foods that will give you that little micronutrient. And then your other question was about
soy.
So you don't have to be scared of soy. A lot of people are afraid that it's going to give them man boobs or breast cancer, but really, if you're choosing organic soy, and that part's important, it does need to be organic so that it's not genetically modified. If you're choosing soy in the form of tofu, tempeh, and edamame, maybe a little soy nuts or soy milk, but mostly just those first three. And of those three, the preference being tempeh and edamame, because they're whole. You can see the soybean there. And you do that in an organic way, you don't have to be worried. In fact, when they looked at a systematic review that looked at huge numbers of women who'd actually had breast cancer, and they looked at soy intake, they found, researchers found when they put all the data together, that women who had breast cancer, who had a bit of soy in their lives, actually had decreased risk of recurrence the second time around. And so, we no longer are scared to sort of say like a little bit of soy in your life is okay. We also know that soy is really helpful for perimenopausal women because it eases hot flashes and night sweats. But, the soy you do have to be scared of is the soy that sits in a granola bar, where you read the package and you're like, why does this have soy protein isolates in it? That's the stuff you got to stay away from. If you recognize something as edamame or tempeh, it's totally fine. But if it's in a processed form, that's the stuff you want to stay away from, because that is the inflammatory bad stuff.
Speaking of staying away from certain things, do you have a source where you get herbs and teas, since a number of the herbs, even organic, were noted as being high in, is it cadmium? Is that how you say that?
Yeah, I know. There's so many herbs that have been found to be high, just random things that have been found to have like heavy metals and that kind of stuff in it. So you do have to source well. The brands that I mentioned generally are accepted as good brands that are quality tested. You can look for seals of approval from like the U.S.A. on your supplements as well. The herb companies that I tend to order from, which are Emerson Ecologics and Full Scripts, they independently verify many of the herbs that are in the supplements that they have. In fact, one of my patients a few years ago had a question about a magnesium supplement, whether they had read somewhere that it maybe had some heavy metal, something or whatever. And I actually touched base with the herb company, Full Scripts or Emerson Ecologics. And I said, have you guys ever independently tested that? And they actually sent me like their readings from their mass spectrometer that they had like used to evaluate, this particular supplement way back when they had initially gotten it. So people are actually independently testing this stuff these days, but you do have to be really careful about where you're buying things from, for sure.
Okay, and what about food combining? Do you have any thoughts about food combining diets, or how are you careful about eating protein and high starch vegetables, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, I'll be frank, I don't have as much knowledge in like those food combination diets, to really speak to those specifically. The food combinations that I think more about are the buckets of like managing fiber, fat, and protein. So I don't worry so much if I'm eating fruit at the same time I'm eating chicken. It's more like the idea that like chicken is my protein. I'm getting my fat from my avocado, and my fiber is coming from the quinoa and the vegetables that I have at this particular meal or whatever. That's how I think more about combinations, because I think about the metabolic impact, like what's actually happening to the blood sugar. And it's the blood sugar, having an even keel blood sugar is actually the real trick to managing like your energy level, to decreasing inflammation, to preventing cardiometabolic disease, that kind of stuff. That's where I kind of go with food combinations.
Okay, and does anyone else have any more questions for Dr. Katie before we thank her? One thing is, if anyone is interested in sea vegetables, one of our viewers mentioned there's a book by Bren Smith called Eat Like a Fish. And he is a seaweed farmer on the Thimble Islands. So he's local, and it's fascinating discussion, because he also is addressing regenerative oceans and the plight of our oceans. So being a coastal community, it's
That's
important
awesome.
to talk about that. Yeah.
That sounds like a really good one to like listen to on early morning walks with the dog.
Yeah. So I think that's it. I don't think we have any more questions, unless anyone wants to throw a last minute question in. But everyone knows where we can find Dr. Katie, drkatie.com, and we know where to find her book. You can check it out at perrotlibrary.org, Athena Books, Diane's books. And thank you so much, Dr. Katie. Oh, and also, Dr. Katie, are you in practice right now? Can people make an appointment?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Most
So
importantly, everyone's going to want to know, how do they see Dr. Katie?
So I'm transitioning to my own private practice in the spring, in the New Canaan area. For right now, if you go to my website, you can read about my private practice called Wellness Insights, and that's the way that I take care of patients. And we can connect that way, and we can, have a little exploratory conversation and hopefully get to know each other.
One more question. Intermittent fasting. Do you have any opinions about intermittent fasting?
I'm a fan of intermittent fasting in the right person. Not all of us like have enough metabolic flexibility to intermittent fast. If you're someone, who's kind of feels edgy if like they don't eat, often enough, or you notice ups and downs in your energy, or you get kind of that hangry feeling on the regular, that would be a sign that your body is like not kind of ready for intermittent fasting and you kind of need to solve some problems first. But generally, most of us can tolerate and probably should tolerate a 12-hour overnight fast. And then if you want to extend the fasting window a little bit to like 14 hours or 16, in the detox, we do 24, a one-time 24-hour fast, which seems to work just great for people because we've really trained them and trained their bodies in the previous 9 days, like how to actually do that. Having the metabolic flexibility to go into periods of fasting and famine, fasting and feasting is actually a really like biologically sound way to kind of like evolutionarily go about at managing, what we now know as like cardiometabolic disease, diabetes, blood pressure problems, cholesterol and that kind of stuff. And obviously like, weight management too, but it's not for everybody. I think if you try it and you're like, this does not feel good in my body, then your body's telling you that you need a little bit of help kind of figuring out why first.
Thank you so much for that question. And thank you so much, Dr. Katie. The only thing we can say is why don't you come down and open a practice in Old Greenwich or Greenwich? Maybe someday.
That's right. A girl can dream. Thank you so much. I really sincerely appreciate everything that the Perrot Library has done for to bring this talk to life, and just being so amazing to be on Zoom at this kind of crazy time of life. It's actually quite a joy to join you from my office. So thank you so much.
Well, you have an open invitation to come back when we can meet in person.
Awesome.
Thank
I look forward to it, Kathy.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. And thank you again, Dr. Katie, for taking the time.
Of course. Have a great day, guys.
Good night, everyone.